So back when I was 17, my cousin Leo and I spent a lot of weekends getting into trouble. Not bad trouble, just dumb teenage stuff. Exploring places we shouldn't. Taking dares we probably shouldn't take. You know how it is. There was this one weekend in the fall October, actually, a few days before Halloween, when we went out with Leo's friend Maya. She had a car, and we were always looking for something weird or spooky to do. That night, we found it. Maya had seen photos of this abandoned mansion just outside the woods near a town called Ridgeway in Pennsylvania. Her older brother had gone exploring there with some friends and snapped a bunch of pictures. It looked weirdly untouched, like construction had been halfway done and then just stopped. No broken windows, no graffiti, just frozen in time. That alone was enough for us to say, yeah, let's go. It was about a 20-minute drive from Leo's house. Once we left the main roads, everything got real quiet. Just trees, dirt roads, and a whole lot of dark. No streetlights, no houses. Just that creepy kind of country silence where you feel like the trees are watching you. When we finally pulled up to the place, it looked even bigger than in the pictures. The house sat in the middle of a huge open field with these tall, dark pine trees surrounding the whole property like a wall. The grass was overgrown and wild, but the mansion itself looked clean, like no one had touched it in years. But it hadn't really aged, which, honestly, made it worse. The driveway was made of gravel that crunched under the tires, loud enough that it almost felt rude. We parked halfway up and got out. The three of us just stood there for a minute, staring up at this giant, shadowy house. "Looks like a movie set," Leo said. "Yeah," I replied. "Like the kind where people go missing." We laughed, but not really. You know that kind of nervous laugh where you're pretending you're not creeped out? That kind. We circled around the back because Maya said her brother had gotten in through a kitchen window that didn't lock. And sure enough, we found it. It was a little high up, right above the counter, but one by one we boosted each other in and dropped into the kitchen. And this was the first weird thing. The kitchen? It was spotless. No dust, no cobwebs. The cabinets were mostly in place. Some of the doors were on the floor, like they hadn't been installed yet, but everything else looked brand new. Not recently abandoned, new. I mean, frozen in time new. Like it had never been touched by weather or decay. There were even rolls of painter's tape and a bucket of tools sitting in the corner, untouched. Why would anyone just stop building this? Maya whispered. We didn't have an answer, but we kept going. The living room was massive, with a stone fireplace that reached up to the ceiling and huge windows that looked out over the field. The house had this empty feeling, like it was holding its breath. We split up to explore. I wandered down a long hallway with Leo. There were at least 10 rooms. Most of them looked like bedrooms. Clean floors, half-installed light fixtures. A few loose boards here and there, but everything looked too good to have been abandoned for as long as it had. At the end of the hallway was a door that led to a 3-car garage. Right before it, though, was a narrow door that led to the basement. And for some reason, I was the one who wanted to check it out. "Yo," I called out. "I'm going to look downstairs." Leo gave me a thumbs up, and Maya shouted something from down the hall. So I opened the door and saw this narrow spiral staircase disappearing into darkness. There were no lights, no windows, just cold air drifting up from below. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight and started down. The steps creaked under me, and the further I went, the more the light above faded, until I couldn't even see the top of the stairs anymore. Just blackness around me and the cold metal railing under my hand. When I reached the bottom, my light landed on a wide, open basement. It was massive, big enough for a basketball court, maybe more. The walls were just wooden frames, no drywall, just beams and support columns. Construction supplies were scattered everywhere. Sheets of plywood, buckets of nails, sawdust. But it was silent, not the kind of quiet you get in an empty room. I mean that thick, pressing silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. That's when I saw a small door tucked in the back corner. It led into what looked like a storage room. Inside were 3 large plastic containers, like those big ones you use to pack stuff away for the winter. I was curious stupid. I know, but I started checking them out. The first one was filled with planks of wood and metal brackets. The second one had old work gloves, nails, and a rolled-up blueprint. The third one, though, that's where it got weird. Before I even touched it, I heard a sound. A faint bump, like something shifted inside. I froze. My light was shaking in my hand. I stared at the container and whispered, "Is someone in there?" Nothing. I stepped closer. The lid was crooked, not sealed like the others. Just slightly tilted, like it had been opened and not fully closed again. I crouched down. Just as I reached out to lift the lid, it started to rise on its own. That's when I heard it. A voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like humming, mixed with someone trying to talk underwater. I backed away fast, tripped over a loose board, and landed hard on the floor. And then, her face appeared. A pale, smiling face, rising slowly as the lid lifted. Her hair was stringy and wet-looking, like she'd just crawled out of a lake. Her eyes were wide open, too wide, and completely white. No pupils, just empty sockets filled with milky film. And her mouth was too big for her face. She looked right at me, tilted her head, and whispered, "Peekaboo." Then she laughed, not a normal laugh. It sounded wrong, glitchy, broken, like an old cassette tape warping in the player. I screamed. I scrambled up and ran to the staircase, nearly slipping on the dust-covered concrete. I reached the top and tried the door. Locked. I banged on it, yelling for Leo, screaming for Maya, anyone. I could hear them laughing through the door, probably thinking I was playing a prank. Then the stairs behind me creaked. 1, 2, 3 slow steps. I turned around and aimed my flashlight. Nothing. But then I heard her again, laughing, closer now, muttering nonsense words in that sick, bubbly voice. My skin was crawling. I slammed my fists on the door until finally it opened. Leo looked surprised. "Dude, chill. She's down there," I yelled, pushing past him. Maya looked confused until I pointed to the stairs. Then she went pale, because that's when we all heard her. The slow creaking of footsteps. Closer. We looked back, and at the top of the stairs, we saw her. Thin, pale, standing perfectly still, her head tilted, eyes wide and blank, her mouth slowly curling into a grin. We slammed the door shut and locked it. Leo and I didn't even speak, we just ran. Maya followed close behind. We tore out of that house, didn't even bother closing the front door. We ran all the way back to the car and jumped in, breathing hard, hearts racing. We sat there for over an hour, trying to figure out what we saw. None of us could explain it. No one wanted to. But eventually, I said something that, looking back, might have been the dumbest thing I've ever said. What if someone's still down there? Maya and Leo didn't want to go back, but I couldn't let it go. What if she wasn't a ghost? What if she was someone sick, hurt, trapped? So we went back. The house was silent. The front door still wide open. The air felt heavier, colder. We made our way back to the basement door. It was open. Wide open. No sound. No footsteps. Just an empty spiral staircase leading into darkness. We didn't say a word. We turned around, walked straight out of that house, got in the car, and drove away. We've never gone back. We don't even talk about it anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear a creak on my stairs. And I swear, I can still hear her laugh. I grew up in a quiet town called Maple Hollow. It was one of those places where everybody smiled at each other. Lawns were perfectly trimmed, and the houses all looked like they were plucked from some cozy magazine. My parents, my little sister Penny, and I moved there in 1997 when I was about 10. We lived on Willow Lane, right at the end of a cul-de-sac, with hardly any traffic, perfect for riding bikes, shooting hoops, or playing made-up games in the street. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But something strange lived across the street. From my bedroom window, I had a clear view of this enormous house. Everyone just called it the old Dawson place, even though no one really knew who the Dawsons were anymore. It was bigger than every other house on our block. Way bigger. Dark bricks, ivy crawling up the side, Giant oak trees shading most of it even in summer. The windows always looked a little foggy, like someone was breathing on the glass from the inside. I never saw anyone outside. No lawnmower sounds, no car pulling out of the garage, no mail being picked up. Just ... stillness. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe the owners were old. Maybe they traveled a lot. But the weirdness really started one afternoon in early fall. My best friends, Tyler and Gabe, were over. We had just finished doing homework and went outside to play street soccer. We had this silly version of the game. No teams, no real rules, just kick the ball and try not to break a window. I booted the ball way too hard, and it sailed over Tyler's head and bounced into the front yard of the old Dawson house. Everyone groaned. Nobody wanted to go get it. I said, "Fine, I'll go," and jogged across the street. As I bent down to grab the ball, I got that weird feeling, the one where it feels like someone's watching you. I stood up slowly and looked up at the mansion. That's when I saw him. In the second-story window, behind the glass, was a boy. Pale skin, dark hair, wearing a striped shirt. Just standing there, staring. He didn't blink. He didn't move. His eyes were locked right on me, like he had been waiting. I froze for a second, my heart thumping way too hard for no reason. Then I grabbed the ball and bolted back to my friends. "Did you guys see that?" I asked. "See what?" Tyler said. "There's a kid in that house. Right at the window." They both looked, but the window was empty now. Just curtains, half closed. Tyler shrugged. Probably just someone's nephew visiting or something. But even then, I knew that wasn't it. The thing is, over the next few weeks, I started seeing him more. I'd be brushing my teeth at night, and when I looked up into the mirror, there he was, in the reflection of my bedroom window, watching from across the street. Just standing there. Sometimes he would tilt his head a little, like a dog trying to understand something. Other times, he'd press his hand to the glass. Once, I swear I saw his lips move, like he was saying something I couldn't hear. I told my parents. They smiled politely and said maybe someone had finally moved in. But when I asked around, no one on the block had seen any moving trucks. No lights ever came on in the house. The mailbox was always stuffed. And when it snowed, there were never any footprints or tire tracks. I even asked my little sister if she'd seen anything weird. Penny said, "Sometimes I hear tapping at my window at night. But I think it's just the tree." There was no tree near her window. A few days before Halloween, I couldn't stop thinking about the kid. I wanted answers. So one afternoon, while Tyler and Gabe were at baseball practice, I walked across the street alone and rang the bell of the mansion. It echoed deep inside, like I had knocked on the entrance of a cave. I almost turned around, but then I heard footsteps, slow, uneven, getting closer. The door creaked open. A woman stood there, maybe in her late 50s. Her gray hair was pulled back, and her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't slept properly in years. "Yes?" she asked, her voice low and dry. I said, "Hi, sorry to bother you. Is your son home? We've seen him in the window sometimes, and we were wondering if he wanted to come play." She stared at me, not confused, something worse. Like I had just said something that didn't make sense to her at all. Then she whispered, "I don't have a son." I blinked, but I've seen him. In the upstairs window, the one with the striped curtains. Her face went pale. She opened the door wider. "Come inside." I didn't know what to do, but I followed her. Everything inside smelled like old books and dust. The lights were off, and the air felt heavy, like the house hadn't breathed in years. She led me up a staircase, then down a hallway with creaky wooden floors. We stopped at a closed door. She slowly opened it. Inside was a bedroom. Small, quiet. The wallpaper was peeling. A little bed sat in the corner, neatly made. There were old toys on the shelves. A dusty action figure, a stuffed bear missing one eye, a bookshelf filled with yellowed books. "Is this the window?" she asked. I nodded. She walked over to a shelf and pulled down a photo in a frame. "Is this who you saw?" I took the picture in my hands. It was the same boy, same striped shirt, same dark eyes. "That's my son, Benjamin," she said quietly. "He died in 1987. He was 9. I felt my skin go cold." She sat down on the edge of the bed and looked out the window. "He fell from this window. Trying to hang a Halloween decoration. I found him right there in the yard. His father left after the funeral. I've lived here alone ever since. I wanted to say something. Anything. but my throat felt like it was full of sand. She looked at me with glassy eyes. "You're not the first to see him." After that, I stopped looking at the house. I closed my blinds every night. I slept with the lights on. I tried not to think about the boy in the window, but he didn't forget about me. One night, in the dead of winter, I woke up to a soft tapping sound. Tap dot 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 dot. I sat up in bed. It was 2:12 a.m. My clock was blinking. The tapping got louder. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to move, but something made me. I turned my head toward the window. Benjamin was there, not in the house, at my window. He was floating just above the ground, staring in, his face pressed against the glass. His breath fogged a little circle. His eyes looked sad and angry. I screamed, loud. My parents ran in and flipped the light on, but when they looked, he was gone. They said I'd had a nightmare, that it was just a shadow or a reflection, but I knew the truth. Years went by. We moved away eventually. The house across the street stayed empty, but every now and then, I dream about Benjamin. He's always at a window, always looking at me. Sometimes I hear a whisper in my sleep, "Come back, come play." I never do. I told this story to my nephew last Halloween. He laughed nervously and said it sounded like a movie. Then he paused and asked, "Uncle Max, what was the address of that house?" I told him. He looked down at his phone, went pale, and showed me the screen. His best friend had just moved to that exact same house. Okay, so this happened back in 2017, when I was 20 years old, and pretty much just trying to survive college life. My cousin Jake called me out of nowhere with what sounded like the easiest gig ever, house sitting for one of his clients. Jake worked in real estate and sometimes looked after properties for wealthy families who traveled a lot. This time, it was the Fairbanks family, super rich, barely home, and leaving for a 10-day vacation overseas. The house wasn't just big, it was huge. I mean, think of the kind of place you see in movies. It sat right on the edge of Black Hollow Lake, in this fancy, quiet neighborhood about 45 minutes from where I lived. The whole place was surrounded by tall trees and thick woods, and the lake out back looked like a painting. It was the kind of place that made you feel rich just by standing inside it. I said yes before Jake even finished his pitch. There was only one real rule: no parties. I was allowed to have 2 friends over at a time, max. Other than that, the house was mine. Jake said they'd even left a room set up for me, plus a list of stuff to do: feed the pets, water the plants, that sort of thing. So the day I arrived, it was already getting dark. The house looked even bigger at night, with all these warm lights glowing through huge windows. The front door was one of those double doors that creaks like it belongs in a horror movie. Inside was spotless shiny marble floors, white walls, modern furniture that looked like it had never been used. Everything smelled like expensive candles and lemon cleaner. Jake had texted me the alarm code, the Wi-Fi password, and a checklist. The Fairbanks had 2 parrots in a giant cage near the window and 2 super fluffy cats that didn't seem to care about anything. I fed them, unpacked my stuff, and decided to stay the night since it was too far to drive back and forth every day. The first night was uneventful. I explored a little, checked out the theater room. Yes, they had a theater room, and ended up crashing on a massive bed in the guest suite upstairs. The next morning was calm and quiet. I did my chores, then went out to the backyard to enjoy the pool. And man, the view from that pool, just water and trees as far as the eye could see. No neighbors in sight, no traffic, just wind in the trees and the occasional bird call. I was floating in the pool, soaking it all in, when I saw something move inside the house. I sat up fast. Through the big living room windows, I saw someone walk past, just a glimpse of a figure moving through the house. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. I was sure no one else was supposed to be there. I hadn't heard any doors open. I grabbed a towel, rushed inside, and shouted, "Hello? Is someone here?" I walked through the living room, then into the kitchen. That's where I saw her. A woman, maybe late 30s, stood by the counter like she'd been waiting for me. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back into a bun, wearing rubber gloves and holding a spray bottle. Her clothes were neat but plain, and her eyes didn't blink much. She had this weird, still energy like a mannequin that just came to life. I asked who she was. She said her name was Maribel, and she was the maid. Thick accent, very few words. She said she came once a day to clean the floors and bathrooms. It was the first I'd heard of any maid, but she seemed calm, and I didn't want to overreact. I told her I was just house-sitting, and she gave me a short nod, said she'd only be in the kitchen and living room, and then she'd go. I asked how she got in, and she told me she had her own key. It was strange, but I didn't push it. I went back out to the pool, stayed out a little longer, then came in and took a shower. When I came out, she was gone. No sound of a door closing, just gone. That night, I invited my two best friends, Corey and Jason, over. I gave them a full tour. They were just as blown away by the house as I was. We played pool in the game room, messed around in the theater, and had a couple of drinks. When I told them about Maribel, they both got weirdly quiet. Wait, she just showed up? Out of nowhere? Jason asked. Yeah, I said. She said she comes every day. Dude, that's sketchy, Corey said. Why wouldn't the owners mention that? I realized then that they were right. It was weird. So I texted Jake, asking if he knew anything about a cleaning lady. He didn't reply, so we left it alone for the time being. My friends wanted to crash there, but I didn't want to risk breaking the rules. So around midnight, they headed out, and I started getting ready for bed. I checked the doors, locked everything, even the windows, and left a light on in the hallway, just in case. Around 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jake. There's no maid. What are you talking about? I stared at the screen for a solid minute. My stomach dropped. I texted back. A woman named Maribel. Said she was the cleaning lady. Came in around 11 this morning. Jake called me immediately. There is no cleaning lady, he said, his voice low and tense. The Fairbanks don't hire anyone while they're gone. That's why they got you. I told him everything, what she looked like, how she acted, how she said she had a key. He told me to lock myself in a room and call the cops. He'd stay on the phone. I went into the guest room, locked the door, and waited. The whole house felt suddenly colder, like the air had shifted. Every little creak in the walls made my skin crawl. I kept thinking about how quiet she was, how I never saw her leave. The cops arrived 20 minutes later. Jake stayed on FaceTime while they searched the house top to bottom. Nothing. Not a single sign of anyone. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. I told the officers what she said about having a key, but they said there were no extra copies listed, just the ones the family had. She probably slipped in while you were in the backyard, one of them said. Houses like this are easy to walk into if you're not careful. They left after making sure everything was locked up tight. I stayed up for hours, too nervous to sleep. I left the air conditioning off so I could hear everything. And around 3 a.m., I did. A soft, creaking sound like someone putting weight on a wooden floorboard. It was coming from under the bed. I held my breath, leaned over, and looked. 2 people, hiding under the bed. One was Maribel. The other was a man I'd never seen before, older, with gray in his hair and his hand clamped tightly over her mouth like he didn't want her to scream. They were staring at me. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life, scrambled for the door, fumbling with the lock like my hands had stopped working. I could hear them moving, crawling out from under the bed. I bolted down the stairs, barefoot, straight into the night. I didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked. I called 911 and then Jake. I stayed on the phone while police sped past me, and I followed behind them as they returned to the house. This time, they searched harder. Nothing. Again, no signs of anyone. No fingerprints. No belongings. No damage. Just an empty house. I refused to stay another night. Jake told me to go home and not come back. The Fairbanks cut their vacation short and flew home the next day. They changed every lock on the house, installed new security systems, filed a report, but the intruders were never found. The weirdest part? Nothing was stolen. Nothing at all. It was like they weren't there for money, like they didn't want to take things. Just watch. To this day, I don't know how long they were in that house, if they came and went, or if they'd been hiding since the first day, listening, waiting, and every now and then, I still dream about those eyes staring up at me from under the bed, calm, cold, and completely unafraid.